Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary. Hey guys, we're here today with Rachel Popworth, an international professional organizer who is here to show us how decluttering and organizing our home changes our lives and relationships. Hey Rachel, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm Rachel Papworth from Green and Tidy. I'm the online professional organizer. I liberate busy people from the shackles of clutter and chaos for peace of mind and productivity because when your home works, your life works.
Why are you saying that?
Why do I say when your home works, your life works? Because all clutter is one of two things. That in itself will blow some people's minds, but it's just two things. It's either an unfinished task or it's a deferred decision. That's everything. If you look around your house and you look at any bit of clutter, it will be either something you haven't finished doing or something you've put off making a decision about, which might be as simple as where that thing lives, but there's always a decision to be made, or sometimes it's both. So when you go through your stuff, you're forced to make all those decisions and to finish or decide against, make a positive decision against all those actions. Otherwise, you can't get rid of the stuff or put the stuff away. So by going through all your stuff, I mean, that's your whole life, right? So by going through your stuff, you're forced to take action in all the areas of your life where you've been procrastinating or you've got stuck or you need help, but you haven't been able to get that help, you don't know how to get the help, you don't know how to do it, or, you're forced to address all that stuff and the whole of your life starts to work. It's like magic. It's amazing. That is why we declutter and organize. Like, it's not, we don't declutter and organize for the sake of it. We do it, or even just to have a beautiful home. We do it because it makes our lives work.
So, if somebody is house is flying, their life's a mess, where do they start and how do they begin working through things?
Yeah, it can feel really overwhelming. So people often say to me, like, I really want to declutter and organize, but where do I start? And there's no actual right answer to that, so long as the main thing is to start, because there's nothing like starting to start to reduce that sense of overwhelm. But if you need a bit of idea of where to start, you can start where you can get a quick win. Start where it's kind of quite easy and you're going to get a big visual impact and it's going to feel great. Or it could be an area that you use a lot, so the fact that it's in a mess is driving you insane. So that might be the kitchen work surfaces or your bedside table. It's important to start with in fact, always to do quite a small area. Don't try and do a whole room in one day, not if you've got a big clutter backlog. Choose a really small area, smaller than you think you can do in the time you've got available, because you can always do more. But if you run out of time and you've got everything out of the drawer and now you haven't got time to put it away again, you get that kind of cat in the hat syndrome where you end up making more mess than you clear, and that's just so demoralizing and you don't want to keep going. It's unmotivating. So yeah, choose a small area, maybe somewhere you can get a quick win, and do that area really, really thoroughly. Just that area, even if it's only a tiny little drop in the ocean of all the clutter. And then have a break, celebrate your achievement, and then move on from there. Like, I would actually recommend, if you really don't know where to go next, just be systematic. Just move to the next area and the next area and the next area that are physically next to each other, so that you work in a wave around your home until eventually the whole home is clear. And then crucially, of course, keep the areas that you've cleared clear. What you might find is that as you go through that area, you need to put some things away, but that other area you need to put them in is a big mess, and so you can't. So what I always say then is just put the things as close as you possibly can to where they would live if the house was the way you wanted it. And then as you work gradually around the whole home, eventually you'll sort that area out and you'll be able to put those things away. Sometimes I just say to people, start in one corner of one room and work around from there and then move to the next room. It doesn't really matter so long as you do start.
Get started, yeah. Now, while we're cleaning and organizing, what are you focusing on? How do you know what to do? How are you organizing the things?
How to organize them?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's about how you use them. So if you're stuck thinking, where should a thing live? The thing to think about is, when am I likely to want to use this thing? Where am I likely to be? What am I likely to be doing when I need to use it? And therefore, where do I need to be so that I can access it easily? So, for example, if you're putting things away in your kitchen, it makes sense to put the things that you don't use very often, I don't know, maybe the dinner set that you only get out on special occasions, on the top shelves or the backs of shelves, or the place that's not very accessible. Whereas obviously you want your cutlery in a drawer that you can open really easily and just go to straight away because you use it all the time. So think about how often you use something. You also want to think about storing things appropriately so that they don't get damaged. So for example, photographs need to be stored carefully so they're not going to get damp and they're not going to be in too much change of temperature because that's not good for them. You also want to think about when you get something out, like that it's going to be safe. So if you don't want to put a really big heavy object up on an inaccessible shelf that you're going to stand on your tiptoes and try and lift down. Not unless you're going to get on a ladder and do that properly. We want things to be accessible in a way they're not going to fall on you or get damaged or fall on each other. So it's just thinking about how you're going to use them, really.
Yeah, it's being very logical about it. How does this affect our relationships? What does that do to our marriage?
Yeah, it affects relationships a lot. Clutter is a big source of tension in a relationship, in all relationships, often not in all relationships, in a lot of relationships. And it's not surprising when you think about it because you've got two people there and each person has got a different level of tolerance for clutter. They've got a different point at which they start calling something clutter as opposed to, well, I like a bit of stuff about it, feels cozy. People just, two people are inevitably going to have a different level of that. And therefore, the one who has the sort of tidier level tends to get frustrated with the one who is the slightly messier level, and the one who's got the messier level feels that they're always being nagged by the one who's got the tidier level, and it can cause a lot of arguments. So getting clear about how you want to have your space and having an agreement about that and then keeping it that way can really reduce a lot of tension in relationships.
So, two questions on that. How do you make that agreement? And second of all, how do you keep to it?
I mean, how you make the agreement is about conversation, isn't it? For some people it will happen naturally if your differences aren't that big, or if the area where the person who's a bit messier tends to be messy is kind of clearly their area. It might not bother the other person too much. But basically, if you're starting to have arguments about clutter, then you need to have a rational conversation. You need to have a calm conversation, not in the middle of the row about why you left that there. Talk about how you want the house to be, how you want to use the house, how each of you feel when the house is too tidy or too messy, and come to an agreement together. I mean, that's what relationships are, right? It's all about looking at what works and what doesn't work together and building a life together.
And how does one keep it?
Yeah, so I mean, how do you keep to anything in a relationship? If you've agreed it together and you have a shared vision of how you want it to be, that is what will call you to keep it. Now, it could be that one of you is being asked to go outside your normal habits. You might really, for example, if you are the one who is particularly messy, let's say, or messier, you might agree with your partner that you would like it to be tidy, but it doesn't come naturally to you to keep it that way, and therefore you keep making the mistake and then the row keeps happening. So that's a question of practice, building new habits, keeping the conversation open, being prepared to say sorry, looking together at what works and what doesn't work. And often with keeping a home organized, you have to look at what your natural way of using the home is. So for example, you might have both said, we'd like the entranceway to the house to be kept clear, but the, in inverted commas, messier partner, every time they come in, they dump all their stuff in the hall and then they forget to pick it up again. The hall is often the dumping ground, right? Now, if that's a habit that person is just not going to be able to break, then you need to think about a way of making that work. So maybe you could put a basket for them to dump their bag in, and they would do that. They dump their bag in there. Or maybe you need some coat hooks or a shoe cubby, or something, so there is a place that they're able to put things. You've got to kind of manage dumping ground in that area. Or same thing could happen on the kitchen table. The kitchen table can quite often become a dumping ground. Often a lot of paperwork ends up on the kitchen table. Well, maybe it would make sense to have a set of trays, like paper stack trays on the table. It's not the end of the world if you do that. So it's about compromise. The tidier partner might want the table completely clear. The messier partner might tend to dump stuff all over the table. So maybe if we put some kind of filing system on that table, it's a kind of halfway house between the two. It's that kind of thing. You've got to play with it. You've got to keep playing with it.
Yeah,
And
like
hold it
working
lightly.
with it and trying to,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not about trying to break the person to do something for you, but rather, my goal is a clean house. You want to be able to live the way you want. How could we work together so we're both happy?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, what happens while one cleans up, right? We spoke about before, you told us that it's either one of two things, either unfinished tasks or
Deferred decision.
then what happens to a person emotionally while they're just cleaning up?
It varies. It varies from person to person. So some people find it really energizing because they're dealing with all their stuff. So they're like, wow, I'm getting all this stuff done, or I'm going to see how I'm going to get all this stuff done, and they find it really energizing. Some people find it exhausting because it uses a lot of it brings a lot of emotions up and it uses a lot of mental energy. Some people find it very, very tiring. Some people, people quite often say to me when I'm working with them, God, I bet you find this really boring while they're going through their bank statements. I don't. I absolutely love it because I can see order. I just love seeing order come to a chaotic phase. But so people worry that I might be finding it boring. Sometimes people have moments of absolute joy because they find things. They find stuff they love. One of the best ever. Unbelievably, I have this on film because I was actually filming the session. I almost never do that, but this client Sue had agreed that I could film a session and make some videos out of it. So we were clearing her desk, which was absolutely heaped with stuff. We took everything off and going through lots of little things, and I was picking each thing up and handing it to her, and she's making a decision. I picked up this little baggie and I handed it to her, and she went, no, it can't be. No. And I was like, whoa. Anyway, what it was a diamond.
No
She
way.
had, not only was it a diamond, but it had a double emotional significance. She had inherited 2 rough diamonds, and so they already had emotional significance because they came from, I can't remember the story, but they came from somewhere back in her family. And then she and her partner had those 2 diamonds set into rings to wear as their kind of unofficial marriage rings to each other. And the diamond in her ring had fallen out. And she put it in this little baggie to get it reset in the ring, and then she'd lost the little baggie. And she found it, and it's on my YouTube channel, a video of somebody finding a lost diamond that's got 2 levels of emotional significance with it.
Yeah, that is unbelievable. I wonder what that did to her relationship. What did her husband think when he found it?
Yeah, it was amazing. She was so happy to be able to reset that back in her ring. It was just incredible.
Yeah, now, would you suggest couples cleaning up their houses together or separate? What do you say on that?
That's a really good question, because mainly I would say try and do it separately, because you kind of need the clear thinking. You just need to make the decisions and not kind of get into you tend to, what I find when people work together is they either talk each other out of letting go of things, or they start putting pressure on each other rather than focusing on what they can be doing themselves. So they get into arguments, basically. Just better to do it separately. But of course, there's going to be quite a lot of stuff people who've been together for a long time, living together for a long time. A lot of the stuff is actually in common, and they can't just make that decision. So what I say to somebody when we're working and they live with somebody else, I say work separately, and then you end up with a pile of, some stuff that you definitely know you're keeping, some stuff that you definitely let go of, and then you have a set of stuff that's like, well, I would let go of this, but I just need to run it past my partner, and then they need to okay that as well. That's generally how I would recommend doing it if you're working as a couple.
So what about those stuff that people just have and they just keep? If it's on a neat and organized way, then that you don't consider clutter?
That's also a very good question. I would say it's clutter if they no longer need it, want it, or love it. So they don't have to keep it, they're never very likely to use it, and they don't love this object, then it's clutter. It doesn't matter if it's neatly put away, it's still clutter. Now, look, everybody's got some clutter, right? Including me. There's definitely stuff in my house that I could say that fits those 3 categories. It doesn't fit any of those 3 categories. So I could get rid of it, and I probably will the next time I go through that cupboard. But as long as your home is functioning, as long as it works and you're happy with the way it works, it doesn't matter if you've got some stuff in your home that if you did go through it, you would get rid of, or that you've got in the back of your mind, I should probably get rid of that, but you haven't. The important thing is that your home works. That's what I said at the beginning. If your home works, your life works. Now, I would, and I do recommend to everybody that I work with, that you continually go through all your stuff. I do a section of my home. When I say a section of my home, I mean like a drawer or a surface or a cupboard door, like a shelf. I do one every month, systematically going around the house. It takes a few years to get right around the house, but it means that there's nothing in my house I haven't held in my hands in the last few years. I know where everything is. I have very little clutter, and I have empty spaces. I actually have a couple of empty shelves here and there. Like, there's a real sense of openness and freedom in the house. But for sure, and also actually another advantage of doing that is that when you come across one of those objects and you're like, I think I should probably get rid of this, but I don't want to at this point, it's fine, keep it, because you'll come around to it again in a few years' time. You can always get rid of it then. It's not going to go in the cupboard and be forgotten about.
Yeah, the point isn't that it should be perfect. The point, like you say, is to be functioning. So if even if you should get rid of it and keep it, it's fine. Now, what if one spouse is much needier than the others, and there are things that you share and things that you want to get rid of, and he doesn't, let's say? Then how much is it your decision? How much is it his decision? How do you work things out together?
Right. So well, it depends. So let's say some of the items could be very. So we say it's the husband that's holding on to stuff, right?
Let's say, yeah.
So some of it could be very clearly his. So like it's his clothes. So in that case, I would generally say it's up to him. You don't get to tell somebody what clothes they keep and what they don't keep, unless his stuff is taking up so much stuff in the house that you're being squeezed out. So everybody has a right to space in their home. And if you're in your bedroom, you've got nowhere to put your clothes because he's got so many clothes. Well, that's just not fair, is it? So
Yeah,
then
it's like overstepping your boundaries of what
yeah,
you being able
exactly.
to, your space. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean we're starting to touch on people who live with hoarders here. That is a very difficult situation. What I always say if I'm coaching somebody who lives with a hoarder is you really have to set your boundaries. You have to say this area of the house is mine. So some really clear examples. My bedside table, that's my side of the bed. My cupboard in the bedroom. Like even my side of the coffee table in the living room. You have to say these bits of the house are mine and you do not get to put your stuff in them. And if I want to keep them empty, I can keep them empty because it's my space and that's the way I like it to be. You still don't get to put your stuff in it. And then if the person puts their stuff in it, you have to just keep moving the stuff out. Now, that can really cause some quite serious rows because people who hoard find it very difficult to have their stuff handled by somebody else, or some of them do. They can find that very confronting, very upsetting. So it is a very difficult situation, but clutter is a spectrum, right? And wherever somebody is on that spectrum, it's really important in your own home that you have a fair share of the space to keep your stuff. So it's when their stuff is encroaching into that is when you would need to start saying, okay, look, that you're going to have to get rid of more than you're getting rid of because it's not fair. That's about the only time. But otherwise, if they want to keep their wardrobe in a total mess inside, well, that's kind of up to them, right? You don't have to access that space. You might not like knowing it's there, but it's their home too. So you just got, you've got to let people live the way they live, haven't you?
Right. And then what happens when it comes to things that a couple share together?
Same kind of thing, really. It's so long as the home is working and you can do the things that you want to do. In most relationships, somebody will own a mug that the other person hates, but they love, and you got to accept that, right? You maybe even smile about it. It can be a little joke between you, like a mug that you always drink out, but you love it. So I love it because you love
Yeah,
it.
I like
But
it. Turn it into a joke is the best thing.
exactly. So long as the house works. But if your home really does not function, if they're like, yeah, I want to keep all this stuff, and you can't use the bath because it's full of stuff, and then there's a conversation to have about boundaries and about how you want the house to work and what in the end is your red line. What are you prepared to accept in order to be in this? All relationships are compromised, so it's always a question of what you are prepared to accept to be in the relationship and what is over your red line does not work and you cannot accept.
Yeah, and that is personal based on every person where they
Of
draw
course.
their red line.
Of
Exactly.
course.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to share with us?
So many things I want to share with you. I can talk about this subject forever. I mean, obviously, I'd love to tell people where they can find me. The best place to find me is to go to clutterfree30.com. And from there, you can get a free set of videos, like a video course. It's 7 videos. They're really short, and each one of them cuts right through one of the 7 biggest mistakes that people make when they're trying to clear clutter. So
Could you share some of them with us?
yeah, so for example, a really classic one is to get distracted. And you start clearing your clutter and you either think of something else, like you come across an earring, you think, oh, I've got some more earrings somewhere else, so you go to get them. Or you come across an earring, you think, oh, I know where that belongs, and you go to put it away. And when you go to do that, you get distracted onto another task, or you get caught into another area of clutter and start decluttering there. And then I don't know, your partner comes home from work, so you have to stop, and then you think, oh, I never finished, I was doing that over there, and you're in more of a mess, the cat in the hat thing. So the way to cut through that is to stay in the area that you are decluttering until you finish that area. So that means you have to make piles of things that belong elsewhere in the house, but you don't put them away at this point. You don't put them away until the end of the session. So that's just one example.
Fantastic. We're going to start now cleaning our houses.
I hope so.
and
That's my
improving our
mission, to
relationships.
inspire you to get out there and do it. If I can inspire people, what I really, actually, if I want to share one more thing, I said it already, but the thing I want to get across to people is the joy of decluttering and organizing. So when people start getting into it, they go past that kind of, I call it a tipping point, where they're resisting it and hating it and feeling overwhelmed, and they're starting to enjoy it and love the results, and their life is all starting to work, and they start saying to me things like, I actually looking forward to to tidying out this drawer, or do you know what, I found myself just, I was standing there waiting for the kettle to boil, and I started tidying a little drawer out. I can't believe it. I would never have said that, or they say to me, do you know what, I'm starting to think about myself as a tidy person. Like, those words would never have come out of my mouth before. I love it when that happens. That's what I want to get across to people, is how much joy there is in it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was
It's really
fantastic.
fun.
Yes, it was. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode and subscribe to the podcast. Leave a comment below so I can know what you think. And to book your relationship photo shoot, CJ session, or just to hear more about what we do, go to lifepicksrelationships.as.me. I'm waiting.